But let me just go back a little bit to where we are right now and how we got here most recently. Back in the 1990s, we had a bubble in the stock market. The bubble, like most bubbles, was created by Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve, and monetary policy that was too loose and too inflationary, even in the 1990s. The inflation that was created manifests itself in rising asset prices. And during that time period, there are a lot of malinvestments, as Mises calls them, made. A lot of that easy money funded a lot of cockamamie investments in telecommunications and internet companies that never should have seen the light of day. Ultimately, Greenspan started to raise interest rates and take away that monetary stimuli that he had supplied during the 90s. And eventually, the bubble burst. The NASDAQ lost 80% of its nominal value. And many of the companies that popped, the dot-com companies, lost 100% of their value. Now, I had predicted this in advance. In fact, when I used to talk to potential clients in 1997 and 98 and 99 and tell them that the NASDAQ was going to lose 80 and 90% of its value, people thought that there's no way that that could possibly happen. I mean, people used to even tell me the government won't let that happen. Well, it happened. A lot of people today in the real estate market have the same idea when I tell them that property prices are going to drop 50, 60, 70, 80%. They don't think it can happen. They don't think the government will let it happen. Well, it happened in the stock market, and it's going to happen in the real estate market. There's very little difference. Anyway, we had the bursting of the technology bubble. Also, that coincided with the election of George Bush. Comes into office, 2000, 2001, and the bubble that happened under Clinton bursts as soon as he's on the job. Now, very quickly to explain business cycles and how they work, contrary to what most people think, the boom is the problem. The bust is the solution. A boom is like an artificial high. Like if you take heroin and you shoot yourself up with heroin and it feels really great, at least that's what they tell me. But anyway, that's artificial. You want to get healthy, right? Then you got to go to rehab or detox, and you go cold turkey, and you go through withdrawal. The withdrawal symptom is very unpleasant, very painful. Again, that's what I hear. But it's necessary if you want to remove these toxins from your system and get healthy. The same thing happens in the business cycle. When you have a central bank, and the central banks made the same mistakes in the 1920s, when you have monetary policy too inflationary, and you create an asset bubble, you create malinvestments, the malinvestments need to be purged. The economy needs to be rebalanced, right? It's kind of like, in the internet bubble, it's like let's say I ran a small restaurant. A circus comes to town, and all of a sudden, there's a lot more demand in my restaurant, and I misinterpret this. There's a false signal. I don't understand where this demand is coming from. So I expand. I hire more workers. I build on to the restaurant, right? I think that there's a real increase in demand. Well, then all of a sudden they pull up the stakes, the circus leaves town. Now it exposes the malinvestments. Now what do I got to do? I got to fire some people. I got to, sublease some space. We go through a recession, a contraction. That's what's necessary. That's the cure. The problem was the false signals that were sent to me that I misinterpreted during the boom. Same thing happened during the 1990s. We had a lot of investments that were made based on false economic signals. A lot of tech companies and startup internet companies with lots of cash from IPOs were spending that money. That was not real demand. There was no profits there. You had all these companies like Intel and Lucent and Nortel, vendor financing all these companies. I mean, it was all a hoax. It was all a fraud. And when these companies started to go bankrupt and all these malinvestments were exposed, we were going to go through an economic downturn. That downturn should have been very severe. We should have had a very deep recession in 2002. We should have had a recession proportion to the boom that preceded it during the 1990s. But George Bush didn't want that recession happening on his watch. He wanted to get reelected. And Alan Greenspan, far from his Ayn Randian roots from the 1970s, is now a very political person and wanted to help his buddy get reelected. So what did they do? They combined with the worst ever combination of irresponsible tax and spending and monetary policy in our nation's history.